And this is where we want to welcome in Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. I know it's a very, very busy day for you. I want to jump right in. Can you give us some of the details of the briefing you had with FEMA this morning, what they're telling you now about efforts post-storm on the ground in the Panhandle?
Well, one of the things that's happened, first of all, it's important for your audience to know, like, FEMA is not the prime responder. A lot of people don't realize that. It is the state governments that step in and are the lead. And then what the federal government is supposed to do is it's supposed to provide assistance and fill in the gaps for whatever it is that the federal government needs, or the state government needs. And so FEMA's fully prepared to do that. But one of the things FEMA's done, and I think it's been very smart in the last year under the Trump administration, is they've begun to change the model of response so that people are really understanding what it is that they're focused on. And the number one thing they focus on when they come in is restoring the basics that are critical to life. So what are those basics? Safety and security, telecommunication, power and fuel, hospitals and healthcare. You got to set all that up first before you can begin to do any of the recovery. And that's what they're really assisting the state with right now. We're still kind of in that phase of safety and security, but they've got plans for all the other things to happen. And that's just the basics. And in terms of being able to communicate, know where people are. You talked about some of the letters that we sent. This is a part of our state, Northwest Florida, has a lot of veterans, there's a lot of military installations. Mm-hmm. These folks still have their healthcare needs didn't end with, because there was a storm. Right. Where do they go if the VA facilities are shut down? So we want the VA to step up and sort of provide them services in the interim until that's set up. What about the families of servicemen and women in Panhandle and these other military installations up here? They have no homes to return to. Now, where do they go? And where do their kids go to school? So there's a lot to work through here, and we're just 24 hours after landfall, so we got a ways to go.
Senator, can you tell us specifically what FEMA told you this morning in that briefing?
I'm sorry, that what FEMA told us?
Yes.
So obviously it is the two areas. There's a specific area that really took the brunt of this. One is a place called Mexico Beach. It's kind of an iconic old Florida town, sort of a well-kept secret, but well-visited. A lot of people know about it, but it's not one of these places, you hear about all the time on the news. And it, from all accounts, is gone. I mean, there are a couple, we were watching some drone video from FEMA's headquarters. There are a couple structures standing, probably not habitable anyway because water got in them. But for the most part, what you saw is just foundation. So, that's gone. And we'll see how that's all rebuilt. And then Panama City has suffered, it's a much larger city, and it's suffered significant damage across the board and in every sector. Hospitals that have had to either relocate patients operating on backup energy, fuel. You have the electric grid is shredded, and even if they got in there and restored power, you can't because there's live wire. I mean, you have live wires on the ground, standing water in certain places. An enormous challenge. You can't just turn this electricity on. You got a live wire in the street. Suddenly, you got fires going on. So, one of the things I really think about is the people that work there, people that live there. They have no job to go back to on Monday, and the economy is going to take a while, and they have no home to live in. So we have a massive economic and housing challenge ahead of us, and it's the kind of thing that if we don't respond to quickly and the best we can, it could very well change the character of a community and affect it for a generation.
Certainly.
Senator, there were still some people that were unaccounted for as of before the show. So I'm curious if there was any information from this FEMA briefing regarding these people that still have not been located that they know refused to leave.
So, their numbers are about 300,000 people were ordered to evacuate. About 5% of them were in shelters. That doesn't mean those are the only people that evacuated. Other people go to family members, relatives somewhere else, and so forth. But it was a lower number than they wanted to see. So they are under the impression that there were a number of people who stayed behind and tried to ride it out.
Right.
And obviously one can make assumptions what that means. If you look at some of the images from Mexico Beach, as an example, where the water was up to the second story, and all you can see were the rooftops of homes. I mean, clearly anyone who was in that structure was not going to survive, which is why we always warn about storm surge. So they're in the process now. Obviously it's a complicated thing. You got to get in there. You got to find people. You have to identify them. You have to notify next of kin. But sadly, I do believe that as the day goes on, and I hope I'm wrong, that we're going to be getting updates on a death toll that obviously is higher than what the current numbers are at this moment. And that's unfortunate. But in an event like this, if people stay behind in a storm surge, it's going to happen.
Senator, you're from Miami. That's your hometown. So you more than most
Yeah.
know and understand the cost of these hurricanes. You've lived through the storms like Hurricane Andrew back in the early 1990s. Are you comfortable, both as a senator and a Floridian, that the federal government is getting to state authorities what they need and that the state authorities are getting the local first responders what they need?
I am, and I would say to you that, number one, because we've had so many storms over the last 20 years, Florida does it better than anyone. We've just had the experience. I mean, it's unfortunate we have the experience, but it's fortunate in these instances that we do.
Right.
And so Florida is one of the states that knows how to work this, and the governor's done a good job of leading that effort in the past. And FEMA has a strong partnership with Florida because it's worked with them as recently as last year with Irma, and there are still FEMA people here in Florida from the last. So that said, people need to understand that, and it's always hard to explain, these events are catastrophes for a reason. It's not like you can suddenly, miraculously, in 48 hours, things are going to be back to the way they used to be. There are a lot of reasons why power can't be restored. The roads aren't cleared. The lines are on the ground. We talked about that a moment ago. Homes need to be rebuilt. You need to find where to house people. You can bring all the FEMA trailers in the world down here that you want. How do you get power to them if the grid is shredded? There's a lot to work through here, and so there's going to have to be some patience, and everyone's going to try to do the best they can to help people, but understanding there is going to be some tough days ahead.
Right.
We are better at this than we were in '92 when I was just a student and we lived through Andrew, but there is still tremendous uncertainty, disruption, and frankly, pain and tragedy associated with these events. And no matter how good the response is, that's the case.
I'm sorry, Senator. We were told you were traveling to the Panhandle. Can you tell us what that's like? How difficult is it for you to get there? And are you going to have to do that by air to survey the scene? Are any roads open?
Well, a couple things are impeding us. The first is communication. The closer you get to where the storm happened, the harder it is to reach anybody. So I actually decided we were going to fly in west of where the damage is because it would make it easier to get there as opposed to coming from the east. So we had to fly into Pensacola, and we're driving towards there now. But we'll have a better assessment in about an hour as we start getting closer to the damage area. Unfortunately, it's been tough all day to sort of communicate with people there. They don't have electricity. In many cases, the cell towers are down. So even local government has been impeded in their ability to be responsive and talk to people if you're not on the radio system with them. So frankly, we're still going off the FEMA briefing and the isolated views that we're getting. We'll have a sort of a better indicator here in about an hour as we get closer to Panama City, what we're dealing with. But the reports, and from what I saw at FEMA with the drone video and the reports coming back, obviously this was bad. This is very bad.
And Senator, help us understand the purpose of your surveying the area. You want to go to the Panhandle. You just came from your FEMA briefing. But when you get there, what is your goal specifically? And what impact will that have on this whole effort going forward?
Well, that's a great question. I think the first is you start just thinking about the long term. At some point, probably not till the spring of next year, but FEMA, because of this event and Florence before it, is probably going to need to go to Congress and ask for additional funding. So that's sort of the first thing you start thinking about is that you want to be of assistance to local governments. The president has issued this declaration, which means these local governments are now authorized to go out and contract services to come in and begin doing the road clearing and things of that nature. But there will be needs that the federal government can provide, and our job really is to act as a liaison. In many cases, we've been able to do that between a federal agency that has a resource and a local government that has a need. And so whether that is, we've got 15 or 20 patients, for example, on dialysis that need to be moved to a place nearby. That's where HHS can step in and be helpful, whether it's veterans, whether it's the military installation at Tyndall and those servicemen and women and their families and their needs that they're going to be. So for us to kind of be on the ground allows us direct access and exposure to the folks who are dealing with this, so that we can quickly relay back what the needs are and try to act as a liaison to sort of speed some of that up. The lead in the response belongs to the state of Florida, but we obviously, because of our role in Washington, are able to be helpful, sort of getting information back to the agencies and getting a response to them pretty quickly.
Senator, before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you on a personal level, as a Floridian who's been through hurricanes, what would you like to say to people who, to comfort those who have lost so much in this devastating storm?
Well, the first thing I would say is, if you're listening to this, you're alive, and that's the most important thing of all. You can the governor likes to say it, and it's true, you can rebuild homes and communities, but once you lose your life, you can't get it back. So the fact they're even hearing this means that they're alive and families with them, and that in and of itself is a cause for joy. Everything else can be rebuilt and brought back, but that can't. The second is that I want them to know that there's a lot of really hardworking and good people that are working hard to help them get through this. And that isn't just government. That's the private sector. That's the the Baptist Association and churches and all over the country that are offering service to the Cajun Navy. You know, every time when these things happen, these guys, volunteers, show up and make a huge difference in helping with search and rescue. There are people in the Department of Defense that are prepared to come in and offer this. So America's with them, and the strongest, most freest, most prosperous, most powerful country in the world, and the greatest people in the world are doing everything they can to help you get through these tough days. It's going to be a tough road ahead, both recovering economically, but just no power for a number of days. A lot of the conveniences we're used to, but I want them to know that the whole country's watching, and that good, hardworking people are on the job, and every day is going to get a little better.
Those are very comforting words from Senator Marco Rubio.
Thank you very much, Senator, and you stay safe out there, you and your team. We really appreciate the time today.
Thank you for having me on.